right, so the first step we want to, for number 1, we want to set up our 2 equations. One positive, so positive 1, and one negative 1. We want to solve both equations. So we would add 3 first. Okay, now 1/2 x, the inverse operation, we want to multiply by the reciprocal. So multiply both sides by 2, which is the same as dividing by 1/2. So we get x equals 8 and x equals 4. Okay, with number 2, we first want to isolate the absolute value. So we want to subtract 16 from both sides. Now this is what you want to watch out for, because now we have the absolute value. We have it set equal to a negative number, and an absolute value will never equal a negative number. That's not saying that x can't equal negative, but after you take the absolute value of something, it's not going to equal a negative. So this is where we would have no solution. With number 3, our first step would be to isolate the absolute value. So one thing, if you think of the absolute value as one big variable, and think of it like a 2-step equation, our first step would be to subtract 10 from both sides. And then divide both sides by -4 because we're multiplying by -4. So now we have it isolated. So now we're ready for the 2 equations, the positive and the negative. Next would be to add 10 to both sides to solve. And the last step would be we have 10 times x, so our last step is to divide by 10. So our 2 solutions are, oops, sorry, that's 20. Our 2 solutions are 2 and 0. For 4, right now, to the absolute value, we are dividing by 10. So the first step would be to multiply by 10. Then set up 2 equations, the positive, oops, and the negative. Subtract 9 from both sides of both equations. Three times x, so we would divide both sides by 3. So our 2 solutions are 7 and -13. Okay, our last problem, the word problem. Now, word problems for absolute value are always going to be pretty straightforward. So Victor has a goal of making $75 per week at his after-school job. Last month, he was within $650. Okay, so anything that says like within, it varies by, give and take, that's always going to mean that's what the absolute value is equal to. So this line right here That's where we could say the absolute value of x equals 650. That's where we're getting the positive and the negative 650. Over by 650 or under by 650. Now, the actual contents of what we're taking the absolute value of is always going to kind of be what you have versus what you want. So it's always going to be like the actual amount of some kind. And then you subtract the goal or the average or something like that. Right, so the actual amount is what we don't know. We don't know x. We're taking the difference of what we actually made and our goal, and this is what equals 650. So the two equations are going to be x minus 75 equals positive 650. So that represents the maximum, 8150. And the negative. Sorry about that spacing there. Okay, don't stress too much about absolute value word problems. I'm well aware that you probably all find that out just by, just adding 650 to 75 and subtracting 650 from 75. But try to figure out how you would model that as an absolute value equation so that when you add 75 and then subtract 650 from 75, what you're doing to have it be an absolute value equation.